Good morning, everybody. Who we got with us this morning? Hey, Harley, how are you this morning? Hey, Harley, are you still doing the lunch brunch get-togethers? Hey, Mike Bailiff, good morning. How's things in your neck of the woods? Anyone out there? Mike, how are you doing today? Nolan, good morning, sir. How is Nolan? Jim, I'm always glad to hear that. Maggie, how are things in Michigan? Jim Livingston, good morning. How's things in Amarillo? Do we have anybody want to make sure we got some good audio going this morning? Keith Kentner, good morning. Got to get your book to you, sir. Hey, anybody want to chime in? Do we have audio? Anybody here? Thank you, Mark.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Gonna do something a little different this morning. In the late 1940s, when George R. Stewart was considering a text and picture book about a transcontinental highway, he thought about but rejected US 6. He selected US 40 instead, and he wrote US 40 Cross Section of the United States, which was published in 1953. Stewart, in explaining why he chose US 40, commented, by comparison, Route 6 runs uncertainly from nowhere to nowhere, scarcely to be followed from one end to the other, except by some devoted eccentric. The highway is largely intact, and it hasn't changed a great deal since then. Good morning, mi amigos. I hope everybody's doing well today. Still a little bit of winter. I'm always glad that you can join us. I really look forward to our Sunday mornings together. This week on Coffee with Jim, we're going to be We'll be talking about the forgotten cousin of Route 66, uh, which is US 6. This may seem a bit old fashioned, but I am an old timer, an old fart, if you will. But I suggest that you have a pad, paper, pencil, and an old fashioned atlas. Take some notes. Might inspire a road trip or two today. If you miss anything, this will be archived on our YouTube channel. And as always, feel free to chime in. I'll try to answer your questions at the end of the program. And please feel free to share your tips, suggestions, and ideas about US 6 and road trips. After all, Jim Hinckley's America is all about shared adventures. And we also have our weekly trivia contest. This week, the prize is a signed copy of my book, 100 Things to Do on Route 66 Before You Die. And you can order copies on our website at jimhinckleysamerica.com. Before being truncated in the mid-1960s, US 6 stretched all the way from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, to Long Beach, California. To the best of my knowledge, it was the only US highway that ran north and south as well as east and west. And that's only one of the strange things about this highway. And it was the last US highway to be fully paved. And at almost 12,000 feet crossing Loveland Pass in Colorado, it's one of the highest US highways. Well, before we get deep into this story, need to take care of a little bit of business that helps pay some of the bills and keep these programs going. And I want to give a hearty thank you to the boys of the road crew for our theme song. And I need to give a shout out to some of our sponsors. First, we have the Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri. The very essence of the Route 66 experience is encapsulated at this delightful time capsule. Connie is just marvelous. And I personally consider a stay at the Wagon Wheel a must on any Route 66 adventure. And we have the Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas. Angela Moreland has given this time capsule a new lease on life. And aside from an opportunity to experience a bit of authentic Route 66, the motel is just a skip and a jump from the wonderful, wonderful Red River Steakhouse. And I feel a bit like a PBS pledge drive by saying this, but crowdfunding is crucial to keeping this and our other programs going. And as our way of saying thank you for the support, I try to provide an array of exclusive content on a regular basis. And I also offer discounts on Kingman area walking tours and free access to any of our pay-per-view programs that we have been developing. Okay, with that said, let's get this show on the road and inspire some road trips. As you can imagine, a highway that stretches coast to coast will be richly diverse. The drive starts at the very tip of Cape Cod at Cape Cod National Seashore. Today, the western terminus is at Bishop, California, in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada mountains and within spitting distance of Mount Whitney, the highest mountain in the lower 48 states. In between are National Forest in Connecticut, a bit of the Hudson River Valley in New York, the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, the Lake Erie Seashore, DeSoto National Wildlife Refuge, and the highway is also a great drive through the Colorado Rockies. In Nevada, the highway is the gateway to Great Basin National Park. And as you might have guessed, the attractions along the highway are just as diverse. In Nevada, there's the fascinating old mining town of Tonopah. And of course, I would be very remiss if I didn't mention Hinckley, Utah. There's not much in the small town, but there are a couple of excellent cafes. At least there were before COVID. You add a short detour, just like with any of these road trips, US 66, US 6, US 50. You add a short detour, and And there's so many things that just enhance the trip. For example, on US 6, a short detour to the north, you can take in Timpanogos Cave National Monument. This is near American Fork, Utah. It's a bit of a hike, and it's unusual because the cave is at the top of the mountain, uh, or towards the top. It's a bit of a hike, but as you climb higher and higher into the canyon, you get ever more impressive in views of the Salt Lake Valley. And just to the east of Green River, I would suggest a short detour to Sago Canyon petroglyphs. Quite astounding. This is also a bit of a hike, but boy, that country is just, man, it's beautiful. Always carry water when you're hiking, especially in the desert. Make sure you let someone know where you're going and when you will be back. And spring or fall is the best time for the adventure. Summer out in that country gets hot, hot, hot. Not Needles, California hot, but hot enough. The stunning beauty of Arches National Park. You know, that's less than 30 miles to the south of US 6. And needless to say, another detour I highly recommend. In Colorado, US 6 and I 70 often run together, but that's not much of a problem as I don't often recommend interstate highways, but I 70 through Colorado is just beautiful. And there's a lot of neat stops, detours you can make, little short exits. US 6 Georgetown, an interesting old mining town, would be just one example. For those who were with you last week, I talked a bit about Pioneer Village in Mendon, Nebraska. Well, that amazing museum is on US 6. And I don't say this lightly. This is one of the most amazing museums in the country. And I would be willing to bet money that it's one of the most overlooked. It's sort of like a well-organized hoarder's house with a few garages scattered in a park filled with trains, a steam-powered carousel, a relocated historic school. I'm a little bit worried about the museum because it shows signs that it's a little down at the heel. And my last visit, the carousel was not operating, and it was in need of some serious work, and that worried me a bit. But there's cars, airplanes, trains, courier and ice prints, snowmobiles. There are exhibits that chronicle the evolution of spark plugs and outboard motors, airplane engines, cameras, kitchens, slot machines, historic tea sets, evolution of tractors. And look, close to that is McCook, Nebraska, which has the Museum of the High Plains. And no needed for that detour needed for that one, or the Nebraska Prairie Museum in Holdridge. Aside from Des Moines, US 6 in Iowa is a string of quaint small towns and villages. And a lot of them really appear suspended in time. And there's lots of great mom and pop motels, cafes, and restaurants. You know, asked often, Route 66, what makes it so special? This is a good example. Along US 6, everything you want in US 66, the mom and pop, the neon, the great little cafes, you'll find them in spades all along US 6. The problem is, US 6 just doesn't have the vibrancy, the sense of excitement for some reason that you get on Route 66. Anyway, I find it odd how many big cities the highway misses, often by just a few miles. It runs just to the south of Chicago. In Indiana, it misses South Bend and Fort Wayne. And speaking of Indiana, Route 6 is less than a 12-mile detour to Auburn. And as a car fan, for years I've wanted to take in the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum. And my trip in 2019, I had a chance to do that. And the Auburn Duesenberg Museum, Cord Duesenberg Museum, wow. It's housed in the former factory and headquarters complex for the company. But there's more than cars. The old showroom and company headquarters is an absolute Art Deco masterpiece. And right next door is the National Automotive and Truck Museum. And I noticed that Paul mentioned airplanes. Yes, Minden, Nebraska Museum has lots of airplanes. But Auburn, Indiana also has the National Automotive and Truck Museum. Now, I've been a fan of trucks for as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest driving experiences were behind the wheel of a World War II era Dodge Deuce and a half tanker truck and an ancient Studebaker stake bed. And my first time behind the wheel of a big rig was a 49 Mac, and then I ran a 50s KB Mac for a bit. So this museum piqued my interest, and it did not disappoint me at all. There's other museums in Auburn, including the interesting early Ford V8 Foundation Museum, the National Military History Center, and the Hoosier Air Museum. The Hoosier Air Museum is really interesting as well. I'm not a big airplane fan, but I like old machinery. And they had some pretty interesting stuff there that really, really intrigued me immensely. In Ohio, Highway 6 passes in front of the gates to Cedar Point Amusement Park. Okay, I am not an amusement park person, but this 364-acre amusement park is located on a Lake Erie Peninsula in Sandusky, Ohio. It opened in 1870 and is the second oldest operating amusement park in the United States. And the centerpiece of the park is 18 roller coasters. There's something for kids of all ages at the park, and I have a bit of memory. We took my boy there when he was a little bit younger, and it was one of the last big road trips we took with my pa. It was down there. My pa lives up in Jackson. Also, US 6, when it goes through Cleveland, is just blocks from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. And here's another one for you. Over half of US 6 in Pennsylvania is designated a scenic highway or scenic byway. And as in Iowa, there's a lot of really neat, picturesque little towns. And I don't want to run over time today, and we're at my welcome. So let me share just one more attraction of special note. The Whaling Museum in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Just absolutely impressive. If you find yourself in the neighborhood, that's another one to see. Let me share a bit of history about the intriguing highway US 6, the highway that goes nowhere on purpose. It was one of the original U.S. highways. It initially started out as a very short highway. In October 1925, the Joint Board on Interstate Highways, they came up with a 75,884 mile numbered U.S. highway system. And one of the routes in the proposal was US 6 that would run from Provincetown, Massachusetts to New Bedford, Fall River, Providence, Rhode Island, Hartford, and Danbury, Connecticut, and then terminate at Brewster, New York. 707 miles. I don't know how this all happened, but it's really interesting. The road was extended to Kingston in 1928. In 1931, it was extended to Greeley, Colorado, by absorbing portions of US 32 and US 38. And then on June 21st, 1937, the US 6 became a transcontinental highway. It connected Long Beach, California to Provincetown on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, 3,652 miles. This made it the longest U.S. highway. And the eastern terminus was New Beach Circle, and the western terminus was the intersection of the Long Beach Freeway and Pacific Coast Highway, US 101. But the designation of Transcontinental Highway was a bit deceptive. From Delta, Utah, about 80 miles east of the Utah-Nevada border, to Ely, Nevada, 80 miles west of the border, the uninformed driver would encounter Quite a surprise. This was the last U.S. highway to be fully paved. When finished in 1952, the event warranted national attention. The New York Times noted on September 21st of that year, paving has been completed a week earlier in 100-degree heat in Utah. A planned two-day celebration would mark completion of a 33.5 miles of arrow straight asphalt pavement running from a point just beyond Hinckley, about 6 miles west of here, to Skull Rock Pass in the Little Drum Mountains. As Business Week pointed out in its issue of October 1952, the paving was much needed. Here's a direct quote. US 6 was designated a transcontinental highway in 1937. Technically, it was. You could get from Provincetown to Long Beach if you could choose to try. But from Delta, about 80 miles east of the Nevada border into Ely, you ran into trouble. Much of this stretch of road is nothing but a wagon-trailed rut filled with dust. It was one of the worst and most embarrassing chunks of federal road in the country. The celebration in Delta was a sign of hope for the communities along US 6. Quote, what this means, citizens hope, is that their restaurants, gas stations, and hotels are in for some comparatively roaring business. To backtrack a little bit, I have heard that that section of dirt US 6 was so bad in the early 50s, the 40s, that people literally destroyed cars. They recommended not traveling it unless you had a truck. Pretty crazy. The ceremony was appropriately joyous, the article continues. Parades were staged, barbecued beef was served, politicians made speeches on how the area was scheduled for vast economic growth. In a final burst of enthusiasm, they closed off 4 blocks of US 6 and ran a 1,500-man square dance. Culmination of the two-day shindig came when Senator Arthur Watkins, Republican from Utah, Senator Pat McCarran, Democrat of Nevada, rode down US 6 respectively in an 1898 Columbus Firestone and a 1902 Oldsmobile. The dignitaries chugged into Delta, disembarked, and cut a foot-wide ribbon stretched across the road. This symbolized the opening of US 6. There was one more change in the highway's terminus. Under State Senate Bill 64, California renumbered its state highway system effective July 1st, 1964. And the state law provided that each route would have a single number with precedence given to retention of present sign numbers in the following order: interstate routes, U.S. numbered routes, and state sign routes. To comply with this requirement, the state asked that the U.S. Route Numbering Committee to approve a shift in the western terminus of US 6 from Long Beach to Bishop. This eliminated the combined section of US 6 and 395. The committee approved the request, so the route retained 395 designation between Bishop and Brown, and US 6 beyond Brown became State Route 4. And there's another little interesting footnote about this fascinating and strange highway. Major William Anderson, Jr. of the U.S. Army conceived the idea of designating US 6 the Grand Army of the Republic Highway to honor the Union forces during the Civil War. Based on his recommendation, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War began promoting the idea in April 1934. The organization asked each state to act on the proposal. The first to do was Massachusetts. Governor Charles Hurley signed a bill on February 12, 1937, naming the route. Over the years, the states gradually adopted the name. And for example, California did so in 1943, in Indiana 1946, and Governor James Duff of Pennsylvania named the state segment of US 6 in 1948. A formal dedication of the Grand Army of the Republic Highway took place on May 5th, 1953 in Long Beach. I'm not real familiar with this area, so I'm really curious if this monument still exists. So anybody that knows, sure chime in. Um, the dedication was a gathering of the 5 related service organizations, including Sons of Union veterans of the Civil War. The 5 organizations held their own meetings, but came together for the dedication that afternoon, and they placed a monument in front of the Municipal Auditorium in Long Beach. Like I say, I'd sure like to know if it's still there. The monument says Grand Army of the Republic Highway, US 6. This monument marks the western end of a coast-to-coast highway extending a distance of 3,652 miles through 14 states. It was erected by the Sons of Union veterans of the Civil War in memory of the heroic services and unselfish devotion of the Union soldiers, sailors, and Marines who laid down their lives on the altar of sacrifice during the Civil War. National Highway first proposed by Major William Anderson, Jr., USA, Massachusetts. For what they did and dared, let us remember them today. The highway is largely intact. I would say 98% of the road is still drivable and intact. But like I say, it's a very strange highway. And I really liked what George Stewart said about the highway, that it runs uncertainly from nowhere to nowhere, scarcely to be followed from one end to the other, except by some devoted eccentric. I really want to drive this highway end to end sometime. I've driven lots of it. I've driven sections in most of it. I've driven it mostly across Ohio. I have driven it all the way across Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, and Nebraska. I've driven most of it in California. I've driven some of it in Nevada and some of it in Utah. Pretty interesting highway, it really is. And now let's get to our trivia contest. Keith Kentner was our winner last week. Somehow he knew that Briscoe was the automobile built with laminated paper mache body panels over wood framing. Wouldn't Ralph Nader love that one? Boy. Okay, first right answer gets a copy of 100 Things to Do on Route 66 Before You Die, defaced with my signature. As obscure and odd as US 6 is, there is a famous author that was so fascinated by the highway that it figured prominently in his book that's now a cult classic. Do you know the name of the author and the name of the book? And Andy, 8. Thank you for the mug from the Pima Air Museum, our coffee mug sponsor of the week. I mentioned this on last week's program, but I couldn't show off my fancy new mug. Let's see where we're at here. Let's see what kind of questions we've got, and I'll try to get them answered for you. Good morning, Mr. Tracy Wages. Boy, we got folks from all over the place today. Angela's with us. Angela is the owner of the Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas that I mentioned earlier in the program. And I'm eager to get to McLean, Texas and see just what she's accomplished. But that's going to make it great because I love the Red River Steakhouse. And now I got a place to stay and a place to eat. Well, 36 degrees in Michigan. Well, we're not going to be doing much better here for the next day or two. But typical here, anybody who says Kingman doesn't have seasons, they haven't lived here for a week. It's going to be 27 in the morning, mid-70s toward the end of the week. Rain, possible snow flurries midweek. Take your pick. A couple days ago, it was almost 70 degrees. Well, Mark, I am too. I'm a devoted eccentric. I have always liked the road less traveled, and I won't go drag out this thing too long, but my mom said I was born 90 and I never got any older. And here in western Arizona, they bypassed most of Route 66 about 1978. But when I'd come in off the ranch into Kingman, I drove Route 66 and I liked it. I liked the old cafes. They were closing fast, but I liked the old Cattleman's Cafe in Truxton. And another reason I drove the old highway was my transportation at the time was a 1946 GMC that had a top speed of about 45 miles an hour. And so the interstate highway just wasn't made for me. Bill, I'm glad to hear that. Route 6 is, like I say, it's been a fascination for mine. Yeah, Paul, Pioneer Village in Mendon, you would really like. They have got not a lot of airplanes, a few, really early, but they've got a collection of aircraft engines that's pretty interesting. B-17 rotary engine. They've got some World War I airplane engines. Uh, all kinds of different things like that. So that'd be really great. Mike, you and I have touched on that a few times, and I know you're a little biased about that, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. And but US 6 through Iowa, I've driven a lot of it, and I really like it. Yeah, Val, Auburn, Indiana. I've driven by there so many times as a kid, and my pa never would stop. And this last time in October 2019, I went through and I had a chance to stop and visit a few of these museums, the Air Museum and the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum, and really extraordinary. No, I have not been to the Studebaker Museum in South Bend yet. It's also on my list. I was hoping the Miles of Possibility conference would be taking place this year in Pontiac, but it looks like that's going to be a virtual event. That would have been my excuse to swing over to see the Studebaker Museum. That's what I hear. Bill, maybe you can fill us in. I'm curious because I've never seen this, but the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, that piques my interest. The world's largest truck stop in Walcott. Very interesting. Hey, something you might, if they have old trucks on display, I've only found two so far. I'm looking for trucks that have the Hinckley engines. They went in Patriot trucks, Republic trucks, Relay trucks, and Patriot trucks, I believe, were manufactured in Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, Val, that is an excellent museum. The Gilmore Museum is extraordinary. Now, I haven't been there for about 8 years, and they've expanded a lot and improved a lot. But that is an impressive museum collection. I like the idea of the Model T driving school. That would be a lot of fun, and I'm surprised somebody hasn't come up with that sooner. But that's a really neat gimmick. And I understand a lot of young people, and by young people, people under 50, have gotten into that driving school. But I mean, some people as young as 17, 18 have really gotten into that. Nolan, interesting. I've never been in the far northeast. I've never been up in Maine, Massachusetts. I've never been up in that country. I've covered most of the country as a truck driver or as a traveler, but Paul, I do not know of an air race along Route 66, but I know there's some, and you and I have discussed this. There's been a lot of aeronautical history along Route 66. Professor Nick Gerlich has been documenting the navigation arrows in the Southwest that were part of the early mail routes, things of that nature. They had a beacon with a generator and then different colored concrete arrows pointing what direction pilots needed to fly. Thank you, Angela. Hey, no problem, Paul. No, Val, that wasn't it. Good morning. The California Historic Route 66 Association. Tara, thank you. These folks have used the COVID situation to their, I mean, it's wonderful to see. They started developing these great Zoom presentations. And I'll have it up on the California Route 66 page shortly, and Jim Hinckley's America Today. You can find it on the California Historic Route 66 page. They're going to do a great program from Amboy, California, very shortly. Yeah, that's about Kingman for you. 5 minutes and it'll change. Ah, I did not know that, Nolan. OK Computer album. Your cousin lives in Truxton. You know, I worked the Crozier Canyon Ranch out that way for many years, and Cedar Springs Ranch and a few others. And I used to go into the Cattleman's Cafe or visit with the Barkers there at the Frontier Cafe. And I used to get my hair cut when I'd come in off the ranch out of Drake, Arizona, at Angel's Barbershop back in the late 70s and early 80s before it became popular. Hey, Bill, thank you. You filled in my ignorance, kind of cured me of the ignorance of that Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania. Something I definitely need to look into. That is definitely a trip. Well, as a bit of shameless self-promotion, like I mentioned, autographed copies of my books are available on our website, jimhinckleysamerica.com. I hope that you enjoyed this morning's adventure as much as I did. I hope it inspires thoughts of road trips. As always, it's been a pleasure and a delight. And oh, no problem, Angela. Jim Livingston. Boy, if that boy is not a talented photographer. And you mentioned you needed some Arizona pictures. Well, I can help you out on that. Well, next week, what are we going to do next week? Oh, Tara, thank you. Amboy's program is March 27th, 9 a.m. Kyle Okura, the son of Albert Okura, is going to be talking about the town's history, its improvements, and plans for its future. That should be a very interesting program, and I look forward to this very, very much. Even better, I wish I could drive out there and pay a visit during the program. What are we going to do next week? Well, got a couple ideas, but we're going to probably do another presentation on, and I think you're going to find it pretty interesting. And I want to make sure I can get all the materials, but I'll have details up probably a day or two. Is there anything else that I can help you with, or questions I can answer for you, or can I tell you where to go? Folks, I am so glad that you could join us this morning. It's always fun. It's always an adventure, and I learn a lot. It's great we can share these things. I really look forward to when we can do these things in person again. Uh, it's a little bit more personalized to do presentations on Zoom, and I've been doing a few of those for different organizations and groups like Rotary clubs and travel groups and car clubs. Give me a holler, and we'll talk about doing that for your organization or group. But meanwhile, my friends, take care, be safe, and don't forget to look out for your neighbors and friends, guys. We're all in this crazy thing here, and we're all trying to. We all need to check in on people once in a while. A kind word and goes a long ways right now. Archibald Pothole, Lackawanna Coal Mine, Couter Sport Ice Mine. Wow. Yeah, Pennsylvania. Guys, thank you. Thank you for that vote of confidence. Uh, I will have a great week. We've got a lot of stuff planned coming up. Like I say, I've got the equipment going. We're working on this. We should have some live audio podcast up real soon. Got a great new video project about Kingman and Mojave County that I'm little video shorts, 3 to 5 minutes, highlighting attractions in the area here in Mojave County. I'm developing that with Steve Lesueur of My Marketing Designs. I've got the first one up. The pilot was a little rough, but we've improved it already. The next one's going to be on White Cliffs. And a lot of stuff to see in the Kingman area. Just lots and lots of stuff. Guys, take care. And until we meet again, amigos, vaya con Dios. Adios.